Ta-da! All right, welcome back to the MMA Vivisection.
Thought we were doing it like a hip hop remix of the Zarathustra thing.
Yeah, there we go. It's gonna be our new intro song, beatbox.
Yep.
All right. So we're live. I feel like, is this a special? I don't know. It feels a little more special than normal, just because we're always live, but we're a little more live this time.
We're on the BE front page.
I know. I got my shit together and actually put up a post beforehand so that those of you who are mad devotees of Bloody Elbow, either on Twitter or on the front page, get to see it early. If you're not, a YouTube devotee, which God damn it, you should be. But
You should live your life in the YouTube comments.
God, yes, absolutely. I undoubtedly endorse that. So we're here to talk about UFC 196 and give our fight picks, the odds, the analysis, all that good shit for what is essentially an okay card with two really awesome fights on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some highlights on the undercard and the prelims. There are a couple of bouts that I think are actually pretty interesting, and a couple of bouts that aren't that great but have fighters that are pretty interesting in them. But the main and the co-main are obviously where the rub is. And did you know that Nate Diaz is the fourth opponent of Conor McGregor's in 8 UFC bouts to be a late replacement?
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
I suppose it makes some sense, but it's
there was I think Diego Brandao filled in for Cole Miller, and there was Chad Mendes, of course, for Aldo. And there was Max Holloway. He did have 2 months, but he was a replacement for Andy Ogle. And then there was somebody else.
Well, this one, Nate Diaz.
Oh, Nate Diaz. He's the fourth. That would make sense. It's kind of weird. I mean, I don't know if it actually does say something about fighting McGregor. Some people have suggested that people, when they know they're fighting him, like they get really fired up about their training and they train too hard and injure themselves. I'm sure McGregor would be happy to suggest that they're scared, and so they find excuses to not fight him, though I doubt Rafael dos Anjos smashed his foot with a sledgehammer in order to avoid the bout.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I can see that. Either way, I got to say, man, Andy Ogle, that would have been really,
I am so grateful
bad.
We did not see that fight. Yeah.
Oh, of all of these bouts, that is the one where you think about it in retrospect.
Max Holloway, although it did put McGregor on the shelf for 10 months, ended up being a very interesting fight. And there's some promise there that Max Holloway could be the guy to challenge him in the future because he did so well in that fight compared to everyone else who McGregor has knocked out.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Max Holloway is definitely – that was a great fight. And, yeah, Andy Ogle, that –
would not have. I can't imagine it would have been anywhere near as competitive.
No, even now that gives me slight chills of thinking oh God, that poor man. So anyway, let's just dive straight into the prelims because we got enough fights to talk about, and we're going to spend a lot of time on some of these, and hopefully not that much time on some of these, but that is always the plan, and that's never how it goes. So first fight up. Julian Erosa, Teruto Ishihara. Connor?
Well, this is one of those fights that isn't phenomenal but has an interesting fighter. I think Teruto Ishihara has a lot of potential in the future. He's very young. He's very athletic. He hits really hard. He had a really competitive fight that went to a draw with Mizuta Hirota, who's one of the more experienced and well-rounded veterans from the Japanese scene. And it was a fantastic matchup, and he knocked Hirota down 3 or 4 times in that fight. He's kind of similar to McGregor. He likes the counter left hand, and he's got the big left body kick. Maybe he's more like Machida in that way. He's got that power left body kick that he likes to throw. He looked a lot smoother in terms of footwork and shot selection in that fight against Hirota. He seems to have improved on a technical level. And Julian Erosa is a good fighter. He's very well-rounded. He's very tough. But I think he's less durable and significantly less powerful than Ishihara. I see the distinct possibility that Erosa could outlast Ishihara. take advantage of what seems to be a not too stellar gas tank, and win a decision. But my feeling is that Ishihara connects the way Artem Lobov did on The Ultimate Fighter and puts Erosa down and out in the first round.
Yeah, this is one of those fights where, like, I feel a little bad because Ishihara is very obviously a bright spark as a Japanese prospect. He's got the athleticism, he's got the style, he's got the potential. And if he can't beat Julian Erosa, then he probably doesn't belong in the UFC. Like, Erosa's not a bad fighter, but if you are going to be a hot prospect, you have to win this fight.
Sure, yeah. Erosa's, I mean, it's a good gatekeeper for a prospect, like as a good matchup. I mean, honestly, I think Erosa's not as tough a matchup as Hirota was.
No, I would agree. But Erosa is, especially because Erosa is like, I think I described him the other day to I was talking to Tom about it, as Erosa's 90% movement and 10% everything else.
Sure, yeah.
Like, he is constantly moving and has a ton of footwork on the outside, but there's no, like, you never see a strike come behind it or anything like that. It's just like feint.
It's kind of useless. I think he doesn't know how to connect that to his strikes. He just does it because it feels like what he's supposed to do. I mean, if you look at that, I don't want to play MMA math here, but if you look at the Artem Lobov loss that he suffered on The Ultimate Fighter, like, it's so easy to see the exact same thing happening in this fight. Overextending on a right hand, getting countered by a southpaw left. And I'm pretty sure Ishihara hits harder and throws faster than Lobov.
At least throws faster. Oh, and there's Conor dropping out for the requisite one-time dropout. And this time it's not so far in the show that I'll just spend another 5 minutes slagging him off. So Julian Erosa, yeah, I don't see it. I mean, my only worry is that he traps Ishihara up against the cage and just leans on him and wears him down for like 15 minutes and steals rounds that way.
Yeah, it could happen.
He's
bigger than Hirota was.
Interestingly, and in almost complete nonsense to my eyes, Julian Erosa is a pretty like solid favorite here. Minus 193 down to minus 220. Ishihara is the underdog, plus 160 to plus 175. I mean, I get there's not, or plus 155 plus 175. I get that there's not a lot of trust necessarily for Japanese fighters in the UFC, but man, Erosa being a heavy favorite over many people, or like a solid favorite over many guys, does not hold a lot of water for me.
My guess is people see Erosa's better experience. They see that he has more fights, and they know him from The Ultimate Fighter, whereas no one really watched the road to UFC Japan, so nobody knows Ishihara.
Yeah, I gotta think that that's it. That it's got to be a record thing. Looking at Erosa's record, you see all these wins and a couple losses, and you don't realize just how meaningless a lot of those wins are, and how the competition there is not very high.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting to me. That seems like value as far as I can tell. Yeah, there's definitely opportunity there, especially Ishihara winning by KO TKO is plus 450. So if you really feel like he could stop Julian Erosa, then there might be some benefit to that. Next up, Jason Saggo, Justin Salas in a fight that honestly, like, I have feelings about it, and I can see the path and how it might evolve. But if you really feel like you have a beat on this fight, you're insane, because these are two dudes that have been out for years, multiple. And I mean, Saggo, I don't think Saggo's been out nearly as long as Salas, who last fought in 2014, in July of 2014.
Saggo last fought in October of 2014, if I recall correctly.
Okay, so Saggo's been out almost as long. But I'm not sure what Salas's injury is, but I know Saggo blew out his ACL in that very publicly shown video where he had like a camera on him in training, and you can watch the exact moment that his leg blows up.
Oh, I didn't see that. I'm kind of grateful I didn't see it.
He's just, and it's not nothing like terrible. He's just kind of moving in and out, training, doing some sparring and all that. And then there's like a pop, and he just drops, and he's just like, oh god, that's
No, I'm still feeling grateful I didn't see it.
yeah. So I don't know how either of these guys are going to come back. Honestly, it's always hard to know when a fighter has been out as long as they have what you're going to see out of them. But if they look like they did when they left, I've got to give this fight to Jason Saggo. And it's these guys are both they kind of represent regional MMA archetypes, I want to say. Salas is very much like the traditional wrestle boxer.
Mm-hmm.
And Saggo is the kicker who also grapples. And it's like he doesn't have a boxing game at all, but he will throw all the kicks from the outside until he has the right feel of range, and then he'll duck in on a double or a single leg and start grappling. And I just, Saggo, I think that style anymore is better. I mean, we've seen that unless it's Ben Wall, Justin Salas isn't actually out boxing that many people consistently. And Saggo's actually got a pretty nice chain wrestling game. So I think he can really compete with Salas there. And then if it gets on the ground, I got to give Saggo the advantage there. I think he's a better grappler. So I think this is one of those fights that it might turn into kind of a bad kickboxing match for long stretches, but I think Saggo has more opportunity to go more places with it.
You remember when Fedor Emelianenko was always talking about how important clinch wrestling was, and he talked about how he didn't advise people to shoot for double legs, so they didn't get stuck onto their opponents and sprawled on. I think Jason Saggo is a really good example of why that mentality is still valid. He is not somebody who always commits to double legs and single legs, traditional shot takedowns like Salas does, but he is a fantastic wrestler in the clinch. Despite the fact that Salas is the one who made it into a Division I wrestling program in college, Saggo is just completely dogged. He's got that Damian Maia, Khabib Nurmagomedov quality where he just drags you down. He will fight dozens and dozens of different angles, one after the other, and push you over a knee or sweep out your foot or change angles or run the pipe. He's just going to drag you down once he gets locked around your waist. And I think that single-mindedness is his advantage here, because Justin Salas is like the classic wrestle boxer where he tries to wrestle, he tries to box, he's well-rounded but not particularly great at anything. Jason Saggo knows he needs his fights to be on the ground, and he fights as hard as he can to get them there. And he had pretty good success doing so against such a skilled defensive wrestler and striker as Paul Felder. So I can't imagine he'll have that much trouble getting Justin Salas to the ground. So I like Jason Saggo and I think it might be a submission because his jiu-jitsu is pretty good. He just didn't get a chance to use it in that Felder fight.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like I say, the big question mark is just, when you get two guys coming off long-term injuries, who returns looking like what?
Can't speak too confidently about it because you just don't know who's been affected more or in what way, or what the effect may be. Yeah.
Saggo is the favorite, minus 185 to minus 210, and Salas the underdog, plus 180 down to plus 150, which feels right. I mean, it shouldn't be too far apart because you have too many unknowns in there, but that seems pretty solid. And that brings us to a fight that I'm a bit surprised. I would be surprised that it's on the Fight Pass prelims, but I know that there's like a serious campaign to improve Fight Pass with hot fights, and these guys are never going to be like, headlining a card again.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying they're never going to be dull, so it's a guaranteed fun fight that isn't relevant.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's a guaranteed fun fight, and it's a fight where it's not like you're wasting a potential future contender, by sticking him on Fight Pass. So that is Diego Sanchez, Jim Miller. Break it down.
I mean, I did say guaranteed fun, but I'm not really that interested in seeing Diego Sanchez fight anymore. It just kind of bums me out. The guy gets cut in every fight, pretty much in every fight now. He gets dropped. his leg appeared. I think he's getting into Joe Riggs territory at this point, where it looked like he was easily injured from a leg kick in that last fight with Ricardo Lamas. I just don't see it getting better for him. And Jim Miller, he's been showing signs of decline for a while, but he's still trucking along pretty well. And he's always been an underrated striker. His Muay Thai is very good, particularly with his elbows and his kicks. He's, of course, very dangerous on the ground. I don't know if this fight actually goes there that often, but, you know, I mean, I doubt he submits Sanchez. Well, I think he might actually. You know what? I'm gonna say that Jim Miller hurts Diego Sanchez and follows him to the ground and submits him, because I think Diego Sanchez is hurtable enough and Miller is accurate and powerful enough as a striker to drop him, and aggressive enough as a submission grappler to jump on him. So why the hell not? I'm gonna say Jim Miller by second round submission.
I have been picking the wheels to fall off Diego Sanchez in every fight for the past like 5 years. Like, this is the fight where he's just going to show up and look so god awful that we can't really.
I mean, they're off. Yeah, the wheels are off. The thing is Diego Sanchez really does have almost unparalleled will. He is ridiculously gritty. He, he's still works
and what
his
I'm saying,
ass off.
So what I'm saying is, I'm when I say the wheels fall off, I mean getting to the point where even the will doesn't make him keep him in the fight.
Right.
And it may never quite happen the way I thought it would. Like, I think he's basically there against that with that Ricardo Lamas fight, because that was just a terrible showing. But it's happening. It's sort of happening more in, like, I think he's kind of going the Scott Jorgensen route, where it's just like everything is kind of falling apart in these very. Or the Joe Riggs route, where everything's just kind of starting to fall apart, where every fight's going to be weird. It's never going to be like, oh, he just gets flat KO'd now. It's just going to be like, he's just not really in this fight. Or he was doing okay, and then, one of his arms fell off. And
I would not be that surprised to see that happen. Or with Sanchez, there's always a possibility of just a horrible, horrific cut opening up, because we know that he gets those horrible forehead gashes in every other fight.
Well, he leads with his face. He leads everything with his face.
Yeah.
So yeah, I certainly can't pick him to beat Jim Miller. Miller is. You can see, like, the big crack in Jim Miller's game is that his cardio has started to slide, where he just can't. He can't get far enough ahead early in the fight to win over multiple rounds against other tough top-level guys.
That could be a problem against Sanchez.
It could be, but I think what we saw in the Ricardo Lamas fight is a Sanchez who just gets hurt badly enough early that even though he's still trucking through it and sticking around, he's no longer dangerous.
Right.
That seems to be kind of where Sanchez is, where you just kind of like Riggs or like Scott Jorgensen, where you're just like, this just needs to end.
And it won't. That's the worst thing, is a lot of times it just keeps going. You're like, or he gets another fight. Like, it's just interminable suffering for a guy who just doesn't care that you have to. This is my job, Diego. I have to watch all of your fights. Don't make me do this anymore.
Yeah, of course, unlike Jorgensen, who I like a lot. I don't mean to bag on him, but Sanchez is like, he has a huge fan base, and he is sort of in that UFC tough one golden child realm, where, like, I honestly think the UFC will just give him fights forever.
Sure. Well, and he still has name value, and he's still fun. As I said, if you don't watch all of Diego Sanchez's fights, you're going to enjoy whichever one you end up seeing, because it's going to be action packed and he's going to fight his heart out. You got to respect him for it. It's just when, like you and me, you watch all of his contests one after the other, starts to get a little depressing.
Yeah, Sanchez and Mir are the two guys I'm always surprised when, like, when I'm on Twitter and you just get a flood of people asking, when does Diego Sanchez fight? When does Frank Mir fight? That's all I'm waiting for. That's all I'm tuning in for. So, that's why he's still in there, and the UFC is happy to put him back out there.
That's why the UFC won't cut him, because if they do, Bellator will snatch him right up.
Yep. So Sanchez is the underdog, and not nearly as much of one as I would think. Plus 125 down to plus 115. Jim Miller, the favorite, minus 137 to minus 150. And I got to say, I kind of feel like Jim Miller is a pretty safe bet at those odds.
Yeah, it does feel like it. You might consider getting Miller by submission, but it is. Diego
Sanchez never gets stopped. That's true. The only thing.
And if he does get stopped, I think at this point is probably still more likely to be a KO. His jiu-jitsu is still very solid. He just doesn't get to use it anymore.
Yeah, it is one of those things, like, I could see Miller fading, but I just can't see Sanchez. I don't like. It just, I couldn't possibly think of picking Sanchez at this point.
No. Miller at minus 140 is not bad at all.
Yeah. That brings us to that's the end of the Fight Pass cards. That brings us to Fox Sports 1 and Darren Elkins versus Darren Elkins.
Darren Elkins versus newer, bigger Darren Elkins.
And the thing is that he's actually not much newer, but he is a little bigger. Chaz Skelly is 1 year younger and has only been fighting for 2 years less.
Really?
Yeah.
Darren Elkins seems like such a grimy veteran.
Darren Elkins he has the problem is he's got a case of Scott Askham face, where he looks like he's 50.
Yeah.
He's only 31, and he's only been fighting since 2007.
That's impossible. That is. He also has that grimy veteran style. You know what I mean? Like, he just doesn't, even more so than Skelly, because Skelly's a little more dynamic and has that he could finish a fight at any moment feeling about him. Yeah. Elkins is that, but like without the finishing ability, so it's just messy and it works, but it's never pretty. It's just like he just looks like a journeyman.
So on this point, I'm taking Darren Elkins in this fight because, frankly, Chaz Skelly is he might be a little more dynamic and he's got that back take game, but Darren Elkins is a pretty mean back take specialist too. Like, I don't know that Elkins doesn't have the same submission finishing ability, but he's exceptionally good at creating a scramble where he ends up on your back. And otherwise, their styles are just so similar. I mean, it's kind of like what I talked about last week with the Claudio Silva style, where it's not so much a shot, but it's, I'm going to throw myself at one of your legs, and then you're going to have to try to kick me off of you for the next 15 minutes. And Skelly and Elkins both fight like that. And the thing is, with Elkins, like, I've seen him beat Hatsu Hioki and Rob Whiteford and Lucas Martins and Steven Seiler and Diego Brandao with that style. Like, I know he is devastatingly good at it. And, you know, Skelly is getting those wins. He beat Kevin Souza. And, you know, Jim Ehlers, Sean Soriano, Tom Ninamaki are all decent, but they're kind of a step below some of the guys that I've seen Darren Elkins blanket and smother. And I just feel like if it's a battle of Darren Elkins versus Darren Elkins, I kind of have to pick Darren Elkins to win it. So Skelly, like, it is seriously a mirror match. This is like that the black white version in the video game where you fight your shadow form. That is very much what Darren Elkins is doing here, but I'm taking him to beat that.
Is Chaz Skelly Darren Elkins' Dark Link?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do think that Chaz Skelly is pretty substantially more dangerous than Darren Elkins. I think he does have that going for him. And his scrambling, a lot of people talk about his back take game, but Skelly has a lot of scrambling tools. He has a lot of tools that he uses to create scrambles and improve his position or fight his way out of a bad one, like his leg locks. Chaz Skelly will probably never finish a leg lock in the UFC, but it's because he doesn't use leg locks to finish them. It's the same way that most fighters don't even go to finish their omoplatas. It's a sweep. It forces the other guy to adapt. Chaz Skelly's leg locks turn into back takes, and they turn into sweeps. They turn into reversals. And he's like that in basically every position, whether it's a headlock, series, or it's leg lock series, or it's just guard passing, or he's just grappling and switching from a double to a single to a body lock takedown to a trip. He's very dynamic in that regard. And Darren Elkins is like that with the takedowns, but not so much in the submission grappling.
Yeah.
I don't think he's quite as dynamic. Once it's on the ground, I don't think he's quite the same kind of scrambler. He's going to force the scramble by just grinding you against the fence and running after you recklessly. I did like what I saw from Elkins in his last fight. I think the Elkins who fought Chad Mendes or Hatsuhioki would have lost to Rob Whiteford. And that's why I picked Whiteford going into that fight. But Elkins, I thought, did a much better job than usual of mixing his striking with his grappling. He moved his head constantly from side to side. Even as he was coming in face first, he was doing a good job of changing his angles, hiding his entries, using his punches to lead to takedown attempts. There was more linkage there than there was in the past, because we've often criticized him for deciding to kickbox with his opponents when it obviously doesn't suit him. I think it's definitely a close fight, but I do think that Skelly, again, that finishing ability, I think he's probably the more dangerous striker, and I definitely think he's more durable than almost anyone Darren Elkins has faced. I mean, getting dropped by Kevin Souza is not really embarrassing. Kevin Souza has gotten, let's see, an 88% knockout rate. He finishes all the time by knockout. He's a huge puncher, and I think surviving that and still managing to finish the guy is a pretty impressive feat. So I think Chaz Skelly maintains his momentum and gets a win, and I would not be surprised if it was a submission.
I will say this. Only person to ever submit Darren Elkins, Charles Oliveira. Only person to ever knock him out, Chad Mendes. Not even Jeremy Stevens could do it.
Yeah, he's got the most dangerous guys in their respective, like the hardest puncher and the most dangerous submission grappler. I don't think Skelly's that far behind Oliveira in terms of venomous submission skills. He's not as he's a little safer positionally, so it doesn't define his game so much because he's not just lying on his back throwing up submissions. But he's pretty damn good, man. That the rear naked choke and his guillotine game, his headlock game are both very, very solid.
Yeah, I mean, I like Skelly's game, and I do think he's a good fighter. I don't know. I think one of the things too I would say is that Skelly, I worry a little more about him potentially. Like, I think if it gets to, and it's going to be a really ugly, hard fight.
Yeah.
I think I have more trust in Elkins keeping that up for all 15 minutes, and I could see him in like the second half of the second round and into the third, just kind of taking over if Skelly starts to wear down.
Yeah, that's possible. You know what I say? If Darren Elkins does beat Chaz Skelly, match him up with Mirsad Bektic.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, but
you're not going to build Darren Elkins towards a title shot. You
no,
other people off of him.
You're not. Every division needs a blanket, and the job of the blanket is to test prospects and see if they can handle a blanket.
The job of the blanket is to see who can fight out from underneath it.
Yeah. So I just don't feel like Darren Elkins is going to get out Darren Elkins. I don't believe it. But he did get beat by Hakran Diaz, who is sort of a better athletic version of that same kind of thing. Well, I mean, he's more technical.
Less
everywhere.
Dynamism. He's like as big as Skelly, but not as dynamic. So I do see what you're saying, though. I respect the underdog pick.
Yeah, and I don't think that Skelly has notably better striking. I think Skelly's striking is pretty comparable to Darren Elkins in the just wing a wild shot at you and then throw my whole body behind it, and you better know it's coming.
It looks like a bunch of random pieces cobbled together with chewing gum.
Yeah, very much. All right. On that note, Elkins is the underdog, plus 138, down to plus 125. Chaz Skelly, the favorite, minus 150 to minus 165, which I can see it. Skelly's got a little more hype. I mean, I want to say hype because it just feels like the wrong word for Chaz Skelly. he has a little more impending inevitability behind him.
He's definitely got more momentum.
Yeah, he's got more momentum. I think there's more of a feeling like, oh, Chaz Skelly is a guy on the rise. But
I'm a little surprised at how close those odds are. I personally don't think that Chaz Skelly is a terrible bet at those odds. I do think this fight is scrappy and tough, and I don't think I would bet on it, but I did expect Skelly to be at least a minus 200 favorite.
I'm glad to see the odds where they are, because I think this is going to be the ugliest, messiest kind of split decision.
In a great way, though. Like, I'm
Oh
really
yeah,
interested to watch this fight.
yeah, it should be fun because it is, and two guys who are absolutely unrelenting in their
Yeah.
ugly, sloppy style. So it's not going to be like, oh, he can fight my style, so I'm just going to kickbox with him. It's very much like, okay, he can fight my style, so I'm just going to push my style at him as hard as I possibly can.
Who can do the same thing harder?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
That brings us to Vitor Miranda, Marcelo Guimaraes.
This fight, this is kind of, man, you know what? I kind of like Marcelo Guimaraes as a fighter. He has such a weird style. He looks like very much like a guy from a Brazilian jiu-jitsu background from Brazil. His striking is ugly and weird, but he's actually pretty good at it. He has a really nice jab. Not that it's like a beautiful technical punch, but he knows how to use it. He times it really well. He's very comfortable fighting on the fringe of his opponent's range and trading jabs with them. He's not easy to out jab at that range. I thought he looked pretty damn solid in his fight with Youngyu Lim. He looked really good in this fight with Andy Enz. The worrying thing is that Guimaraes is not like a massive finisher. His 2 UFC wins so far are both split decisions, which kind of suggests that he has difficulty putting his stamp on a lot of fights. But I kind of trust his well-rounded grittiness against Vitor Miranda. Yeah, I don't know, man. Vitor Miranda is, you know what this fight is? Vitor Miranda has better jiu-jitsu than he seems like he does, and Marcelo Guimaraes has better striking than it seems like he does. Both of these guys are a little more well-rounded than they're given credit for. It's a striker versus grappler fight, but the lines are kind of blurred. I just think that Miranda is a lot better when he has somebody chasing after him, desperately hunting the takedown. And that is not Marcelo Guimaraes' style. Miranda tends to find these big explosive moments of offense in the middle of a fight like that, reversing Clint Hester's takedowns because Hester thought, oh, I got a striker in front of me, I better grapple him. Or, fighting off the takedowns with Jake Collier, landing a head kick, stuff like that. But Guimaraes' style is a little more rangy, a little more tricky. He tends to draw his opponents into his takedown attempts. He tends to play around with his strikes. He mixes them up pretty well. He's a pretty solid kicker. And I think Miranda is just overall a little too reliant in MMA on like sudden moments of crushing offense, getting a gigantic head kick or reversing you and raining down punches, something big happening. And as much as it seems like he should be the better striker in this matchup, he also lost twice to Fabio Maldonado, which is a guy who only does one thing and doesn't really do it all that well. He's just tough. And he beat Miranda twice. So, I like the more well-rounded style of Guimaraes and the measured, ugly striking over Miranda's Hail Mary style.
I think you're nuts. I'm just going to say it flat out. I think you're insane. Crazy.
Why is that?
Well, partially because Guimaraes, we're talking split decisions over Andy Enz and Dan Stitchen. So, when we're saying he has trouble putting his stamp on his fights, he has trouble putting his stamp on fights against the absolute lowest end of the UFC middleweight division.
He had a competitive bout with Youngyu Lim, who's certainly not a low-end fighter.
Yeah, right until he got knocked the fuck out. It just, if we're saying like, oh, the guy who has big moments of offense can't finish the guy who got knocked out by another guy who only has big moments of offense. It just, Miranda... The big thing with me with Guimaraes is, his punches have some technique behind them, and he has some trickiness to his game, especially his kicking game. When he's kicking and punching in combination, that is far and away where he's best.
Yeah.
But he's also a fighter who, the the more times he has to throw a strike in any combination, the higher up in the air his head and chin get. And the more stiff he becomes until like by the end of the combination, he's just got his arms out and he's just kind of like winging stuff. And, and so it's very much like in a single moment, he can throw a good jab or he can throw a good leg kick or he can throw a good leg kick jab combination or a good leg kick overhand right combo. But I just think that if he's going to be mixing that in like small singular moments, giving Miranda a ton of time on the outside, he's going to start getting caught with enough things to make him try and push the fight away from that.
But that's the thing. I think he can do that better than Clint Hester.
I don't know that he can. His takedown game does not look that great against Andy Enns.
It was okay. He needs the reactive takedowns more than anything. He times them well.
He times them well, but I don't think he finishes them well. I don't think that
This is Vitor Miranda we're talking about here. We're not talking about like a guy with a multi-layered takedown defense.
I know, but that's the same thing you could say about Andy Enns.
Talking about a guy who got stalled out by Antonio Carlos Jr. in Antonio Carlos Jr.'s fourth fight.
Antonio Carlos Jr. is also a house with fists on it. Like
That's true.
And Guimaraes is coming off a year and a half out of the sport.
That's true. That's a good point.
All these things, I think that Miranda's one of those dudes that and I've been doing this all the way. I picked Collier over him. I picked Hester over him. And I think he's one of those dudes that we're just going to keep people are going to keep picking against, and he's going to do remarkably well until he gets up to that slightly better than average middleweight status that is, kind of Brad Tavares, Rafael Natal territory, where they did really well for a while until they got to the point that they actually had to start fighting good middleweights, and then it kind of all falls apart.
Is he like the Nikita Krylov of this division?
Yeah, he might be. And I think that Guimaraes, I don't have the trust in him to not be that dude. To not be another bump in the road on that. He's just too stiff when he actually has to exchange over time. And then his grappling, I think his takedown game isn't powerful enough that I see him able to just actually out wrestle and grapple Miranda. I see him ending up getting stuck a lot in prolonged exchanges where he gets uncomfortable and where Miranda can land something big and flashy. So
yeah, I see it. It's not like I'm super confident in Guimaraes. I'm just definitely not confident in Vitor Miranda.
No, and I will say that the odds on Vitor Miranda here are
way minus 300. What the hell is that?
Vitor Miranda is minus 277 to minus 320, and Marcelo Guimaraes is plus 269 down to plus 210, which this is like a 150, 200 range kind of fight.
This is definitely it should be in the 100 ranges for both fighters. If you, by the way, if you like what Zane says, Zane, if you're confident in your Vitor Miranda pick, even to a reasonable degree, Miranda by KO is an underdog odds, plus 120. That's pretty much the only way he wins fights.
It's true. And so that might be a very solid way to go. Guimaraes by submission is plus 1,600. So if you think that Guimaraes is going to sub out Vitor Miranda, there's a chance bet for you.
I wouldn't pick it. He's fairly good. He's like Maldonado. He's doesn't look that great off of his back, and he gets taken down too easily. But he's just not. You just can't work him with jiu-jitsu like you would expect to be able.
Yeah. Hey, and I thought I was right last week about Francisco Rivera, Brad Pickett.
You were. No, you were right. You were right. The judges agree with me, but I didn't agree with me.
Yeah.
After watching the fight.
All right, and that brings us to Erick Silva, Nordine Taleb, and Man, Erick Silva has to win this fight. Like he, this is about this is gonna tell me a lot about where Erick Silva is right now, because Erick Silva is one of those dudes who kind of like Brandon Thatch to a greater degree at the moment. We all think of him as like this hot young thing on the rise, or did for a long time.
Is that how you think of him, Zane?
Well, yeah, he's pretty cute.
He definitely is very cute. He's got the boy band look about him. I think that's his fight nickname. He's the Tiger, apparently, even though no one uses it. Should definitely be Erick the Hot Young Thang Silva.
Is it Tiger? I thought it was just Indio. That was always.
I guess it was. Is that what? Does that mean Tiger?
No, I think it means like Indian, like he's of native descent.
On Sherdog, it is now the Tiger.
Well, he's changed it then. He's now Erick the Tiger Silva. Okay, that aside, Erick Silva came into the UFC pretty much as a finished product. He came in with the experience, as a done fighter who is going to compete at the level he competes at. And that's what we've seen over his career. And it's getting to the point now, he's been around long enough that he's probably hitting the decline. In that Neil Magny fight, he looked like he had hit a decline. Like he just looked like a guy who, apparently there's some talk about an injury, so that may have come up, but he looked out of shape and he looked like his already suspect cardio was non-existent. And just like the explosion was not there in nearly the consistency that it had been in the past.
It almost looked like he was trying not to be so explosive, because he did fight. The cardio wasn't great, but he kept up a volume more consistently throughout the fight, but it just wasn't like, that's the thing. Erick Silva either has to, it's like a gambit. He has to be immediately successful, or if he tries to avoid blowing his wad early, he's just going to lose a slow split decision.
Yeah. Now, Nordine Taleb, to that end, is absolutely a fighter that classic Erick Silva could go out and style on in 30 seconds. He's a dude that he's incredibly foot slow and he's not really very dangerous, and he's just absolutely made for somebody like Erick Silva to duck in, throw to the ground, jump on his back, and choke out in a split second. But if that's not the Erick Silva that we have today, then he's also big and lumbering and strong and can just press a consistent pace round after round after round and take a round on points against somebody that's going to fade out quickly. So, man, you know what? The dreamer in me is going to pick Erick Silva by submission.
Yeah, that's all right. Erick Silva, like, you cannot deny Erick Silva's skills. They are just so intrinsically linked to his athleticism, and his athleticism is so intrinsically linked to a very small pool of stamina that you just can't trust him to win. Even though, especially with his counter wrestling and his jiu-jitsu, you watch him, you're like, man, this guy is so dangerous and so good. The way he submitted Jason High just with ease was crazy. Yeah. He's out, and you know how well he did in the beginning of the fight with John Fitch. He's very dangerous on the ground. He hits hard. His striking game isn't really there in terms of technique, but he's dynamic enough to make it work as long as he has the energy to throw those techniques out there and move that quickly. You know why I really like this matchup? Because both of these guys represent a slight step down from the type of guy that beat them last. Nordine Taleb is like Neil Magny, but not as good. And Erick Silva is like Worley Alves, but not as good. You know, we've got like this small, explosive guy with the dangerous submission skills, and he could latch into submission at any moment. And then we have the tall guy who fights well in the clinch and likes to control from top position. And I don't know, like, how much longer can Erick Silva do this thing? I mean, you and I both agree Nordine Taleb has actually made some notable improvements in recent years. I think he's come along, and that's not surprising. He's a tri-star gym fighter. He's got some good coaches behind him. On that note, Erick Silva is reportedly at King's MMA for this camp, which could be very helpful for him. But I don't know what the effects are. He might just be another Jake Ellenberger. Who knows? I'm going to pick Nordine Taleb because the dreamer in me thinks that boring future middleweights should win fights against pretty athletic phenoms. So I'm going to go Nordine Taleb by split decision, and I think it's going to be real ugly. I think he's going to get beat up in the first round, and then Silva's just going to be pooped.
Your dreamer sucks.
That's you can say that I'm a dreamer, but my dreams are pretty dull.
Yeah. you dream of Brad Scott by split decision.
That is my dream.
Oh, you jerk for convincing me on that. I had actually convinced myself. Now I remember that Yatko wasn't going to win because of my feelings of his cardio problems, but those didn't show up either. So fuck that.
No.
All right, that brings us to Brandon Thatch, Siyar Bahadurzada, Siyar the Great.
The Great.
And you take it away.
Pretty solid matchmaking here. Bahadurzada is a guy you know exactly what to expect from him. He's like old school sprawl and brawl. He's got pretty good kicks, pretty good punches. He hits hard. He's like Chuck Liddell, basically. He counters really well off the back foot. And he's got a really good initial takedown defense. That first sprawl, he sprawls hard and he squashes you down to the mat and then fights his way off and goes back to striking. And that's something that could trouble Brandon Thatch. You know, Brandon Thatch something has just not come together in his game, despite all the promise he seemed to have come into the UFC. And you got to wonder at this point if it will come together because he is, 30 years old?
He's 30 and he's been fighting since 2008. So he's been around long enough.
He should at least be coming into his own right now. So a few hiccups are not inexcusable, but like if he doesn't win this fight, the hopes are kind of dashed. You know, and I think Thatch's big problem was like in that Ben Henderson fight is that he's big and imposing, but because he didn't have that experience, he seemed like he started to run out of ideas of what to do against Ben Henderson. He was like, I'm going to try this weird thing now. It would have been great if he had just been poised enough to just kind of change his timing a little bit, to play with rhythm and distance, and just to keep doing the things that were working. Instead, he started doing crazy things. He got tired. He didn't know how to stay consistent, and he lost. Fortunately, Bahadurzada is unlikely to work him on the ground the way both Gunnar Nelson and Ben Henderson have. And I think Thatch is probably big enough, long enough, and skilled enough in the beginning of the fight to bank a round or two early. The problem with Bahadurzada is that despite his great skills, he has just not been consistent in the UFC. He just has not been able to. He basically needs like a reckless grappler diving after him to really look like the fighter that he seems to have the potential to be. And in fights that are closely matched, I mean, like losing to John Howard is a hell of a lot worse these days than losing to Gunnar Nelson and Benson Henderson. So I like Brandon Thatch. The dreams could be dashed, like I said, but I think he still has some potential, and I think he learns from his last two fights and comes in and fights a careful kickboxing bout with Bahadurzada and takes a unanimous decision.
Should be noted, though, that when Siyar Bahadurzada lost to John Howard, that is not the John Howard of today's UFC, because that was 3 fucking years ago.
It's true. Where has he been?
He has been injured. He had, I want to say his shoulder problems, but he's just been all kinds of injured for years. And
you say it's not the John Howard of today, but John Howard of today just got the greatest win of his career over Cathal Pendred.
Then he fought Tim Means and
nothing can take that Pendred win away from him. It was the highlight of his career. I say he's still trucking along just fine. It's
true, but I mean, the Bahadurzada is also, you know, like we talked with the Saggo and Salas fight earlier. He's another dude where you just have no clue what we're going to see out of him. Mm-hmm. He's been out forever. Like 3 years is a lifetime. And it's not like Siyar. I feel like when he got into Strikeforce, he didn't ever fight in Strikeforce. That's right. But when he finally got to Strikeforce, before getting injured the first time, I want to say, he was sort of everybody was like, oh, you know, this is a prospect that we've been looking at, and I can't wait to see what he does in the future. But that was already 9 years into his career.
Yeah, he's been fighting since what, like 2002?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been fighting for ages. And at this point, after a 3-year layoff, the expectation has got to be that he's going to start getting worse, not better.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that the layoff did like that magic,
That's true.
full body healing thing where he's now back at a point that is, not nearly, doesn't have all the wear and tear that he might otherwise have on him, but that's a hell of a thing to bank on, and it's usually, I don't know, it's not dependable. And Thatch, I don't know. Yeah, Thatch has some room to get better. My only worry, I think, especially in that Henderson fight, that he ran out of ideas. And yeah, he didn't have the experience of Henderson, but he has enough experience that he shouldn't have run out of ideas. Like, he should be at the point where he has a relatively complete game now.
I think it was one of the first fights ever for him where he wasn't just trucking a less experienced, less dynamic opponent. Like it was the first he'd fought enough times, but it was legitimately the first time where he fought a crafty veteran.
Yep.
Who could adapt to that first wave of success that he started to have.
It's true. So I think, and then I do also worry that Gunnar Nelson was able to drop him as quickly as Nelson did, because Bahadurzada certainly is going to be more aggressive and hit harder.
Mm.
But yeah, I got to pick. I got to think of that as more of a fluke and say that Thatch is going to be able to pick Bahadurzada apart, because Bahadurzada kind of comes from a different era. Like, he's just got a style that's built out of a different era of the sport. And
does he not remind you of Chuck Liddell?
Mm-hmm.
The way he fights, like, he's really old school sprawl and brawl. He really reminds me of the Iceman.
Yeah, and so I kind of wonder if he's just going to be coming in on too linear, too straight of lines, too predictably, and in ways that Thatch can kind of work around and pick off. So I'm taking Brandon Thatch, maybe even by knockout. But Bahadurzada's always been super tough, so probably by decision. It could get messy, though, by the end. By the time we get halfway through this, or by the time the second round ends, this fight could just be a huge mess.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Brandon Thatch should have really solid cardio. He trains at altitude. I just think he kind of had an adrenaline dump in that Ben Henderson fight. I don't think it's necessarily representative of how good he normally is in terms of stamina.
Well, there's also the thing that he kind of has that Hyung-Gyu Lim thing, where it's like, when you throw as much power into everything as they do, even though the technique is sometimes pretty good, like, it's still like, these are dudes that just put so much behind every strike that you're just gonna kind of get tired. Like,
yeah, but that's Bahadurzada as well.
It is. So Thatch is the favorite, minus 280 to minus 315. And Bahadurzada, the underdog, plus 263 down to plus 215. I think that feels somewhat reasonable, especially after Bahadurzada's long layoff.
Mm-hmm. I would not bet on this fight, though. Nope. I have no trust in Thatch right now. I have a feeling, but I can't put faith in him yet.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of trust either. And it is a punch. It is a fight that is like, both guys have the puncher's chance to just knock somebody out with one big shot. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at a guy who has a great punching power and hasn't fought for 3 years, and a guy who has great punching power or great striking power and has not looked like he's developed in the ways he should have. So tough fight to call. That brings us to Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko, and I believe I'm leading on this. And this is kind of a similar fight for me. I mean, obviously neither of them has the layoff that Bahadurzada comes with, but I kind of have, like, these are two fighters that I'm really excited about and have really good striking, and I'm really excited to see them strike, and yet I have really big concerns about both of them.
Really? What are your concerns about Shevchenko? That's what I'm most, because I probably have the same concerns about Nunes.
I think my concerns about Shevchenko really are that she, as somebody who seems like she's kind of dabbled in MMA for years, I'm wondering, I still am a little concerned about how well she can do against somebody who's equally as athletic and can really press an active wrestling game.
Mm-hmm.
Because Kaufman is a good clinch controller, but not the greatest. She's just not a great athlete, frankly. That's all there is to it. She doesn't have great drive. She can't, just like rip somebody to the ground.
She's a Michael Bisping kind of fighter. She's a grinder.
Yeah. And by the third round of that fight against Shevchenko, as Shevchenko kind of started to wear down a bit, Kaufman started to find that success, just like being dogged, pressing it, and getting the fight to the ground and getting it in the grind. She started to do well late in the fight. And so
she did only have 5 weeks of prep, so she didn't get to go through the hardest portion of her training camp.
She didn't, it's true. But I worry about that with somebody like her who has just kind of seems like has used MMA as like this other way to make money while also kickboxing for a long time. It's never been like, oh, I'm doing MMA and I'm really focused on my training and evolving a really complicated MMA game. It's like, no, I'm a Muay Thai fighter and I take some MMA fights to just get a little extra cash. And then I figured out that the UFC put together a good enough division to make real money. So I started diving into MMA as like making a run to the UFC. So I am a little concerned about that, especially because Amanda Nunes will come out and just throw people to the ground and pummel them if she thinks she can. Like, she is very capable of doing that. She is a great athlete, and she does have a well-rounded MMA game that is built to be highly successful in MMA. She also has huge cardio questions that I have yet to see significantly answered, where she starts out like a house on fire. She fights amazingly hard for round one, and if she doesn't finish you in round one, she loses. Like, the fight goes past round one, and other than good wins early in her career against Vanessa Porto and Edion Gomes, she has lost every fight that has gone outside the first round. So if she can't stop Shevchenko early, and I don't know that she can, because Shevchenko is a very good, solid defensive kickboxer and a very good offensive kickboxer who I think can force Nunes to to not be able to land the shots she wants. Then does Nunes have enough left to win later rounds? And I'm not sure about that. So I have real questions about this. I feel like I should pick Nunes here because she has put so much more concerted effort into her MMA career and seems like she can just come out and put Shevchenko on her back and pummel her and derail that hype train. But I will not be at all surprised if Shevchenko just absolutely outworks her standing and forces Nunes into a sloppy fight that she loses.
Yeah, I mean, Nunes looked amazing against Sarah McMahon. She looked impressive against Shayna Baszler, though there's a lot less you can take away from that at this point.
She did what she should have against Shayna Baszler.
Yeah, and that's good. Like, seeing her move around well and mix up her strikes and throw accurately, that's great. But she also looked really good in the beginning of that Kat Zingano fight in very much the same ways. And it just turned out that, like, no matter how much it looked like Nunes had improved as a striker and as a defensive wrestler, she still was the old Amanda Nunes after the first round. And that's been her problem for a long time. She just has limited stamina. I think she throws full power like Erick Silva. She has never won a decision. Erick Silva actually has won a few, so her record is worse than Erick Silva's in this respect. She has only ever won by finish, never won by decision, never won in the third round. She's only won 2 of her 11 victories after the first round. She just doesn't do well down the stretch, and Shevchenko does really well down the stretch. She is she's tough. She's a good defensive fighter. I think what happens is Nunes comes in, she throws those good strikes. I would not be surprised she connects with a few, especially with the low kicks and things like that. But I think rather than trying to counter her, Shevchenko does the Andre Ward strategy that she used against Kaufman. She slides in under her punches as Nunes leads, clinches with her, ties her up, and wears her out in the first round, and then beats her up a little more in the following 2 rounds. So I think Shevchenko is a great addition to this division, and with a full camp behind her, I think. And now that she's in the UFC, so now she will be dedicating herself full time to MMA. I have to imagine that her game will continue to improve.
Yeah.
And I can't trust Nunes after the first round. I just have no reason to trust her until I see it happen. I have to, you got to show me that you can do more than that. And it does not seem likely that she gets a first round finish against a kickboxer with as much experience as Shevchenko.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm very split on this because I really easily can see and imagine Shevchenko getting in and clinching up with Nunes, and Nunes using the fact that she's several inches taller and bigger and just super powerful and athletic to just slam her down and start wailing on her.
That's true. It doesn't have to be a knockout on the feet. She could drag her down, and she's got great jiu-jitsu in the beginning of the fight too.
So she could just wail on her in the first round and get a stoppage. Even if it's not like a clean TKO, she could get that Juliana Pena stoppages where it's just like the ref is just like, okay, fine, look, let's just stop this because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I could see it. And so, but I can also see Pena or Nunes doing that and not getting a stoppage, or just kind of throwing a bunch of wild stuff and not having any of it really work that well. And then just getting tired and getting picked apart and getting trapped into sloppy shots and big wild strikes and just getting pot shotted. And so this is where I'm not going to be a dreamer, and I'm going to pick Nunes to derail Shevchenko and set the UFC's hopes for a new bantamweight.
Doesn't that make you a dreamer? Nunes is the Erick Silva in this situation.
Yeah, but she's also I just have a lot more. Like, I have seen Amanda Nunes consistently go out and get high-level women's MMA wins. Like, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
She's beat Julia Budd, Edion Gomes, Vanessa Porto, Jermaine Durandamy, Sarah McMahon. Like, she has a really great list of women that she's beat in MMA until Valentina Shevchenko beat Sarah Kaufman. Her best win was Jan Finney.
That's true.
And I just have the faith that Nunes, as a complete MMA fighter who's every bit as athletic as Shevchenko, can win this fight. And it may not happen, but I would love to see Shevchenko win it because she's much more the kind of fighter the UFC would love to throw into a title fight after 2 wins.
Oh, she's got a style so similar to Holly Holm's.
Yep.
With just like slight differences, it would be great to see them matched up. It probably wouldn't be thrilling, but it would be a great tactical fight.
Yeah, it would be a fun fight that I would love to see in the future. On that note, Nunes is a very slight favorite, -115 to -135. Valentina Shevchenko +100 or +115 down to -115. So you can get Shevchenko at underdog or at favorite odds or at underdog odds. Either way you feel about her in this fight, that might be, there's something there to be had.
I think if you can find her at underdog odds, she's a pretty damn solid bet.
Yeah, Shevchenko +115 is not bad. And Nunes by TKO KO is +300. So that's the only way she wins.
It's true. Sometimes she gets a submission. Sometimes she hurts you so bad that she submits you.
It's true. I
think she has a submission by punches on her record too.
All right. That brings us to Corey Anderson, Tom Lawlor. Take it away.
You have to go with Corey Anderson here. It's really tempting. It's actually not tempting, but it probably is to some people to use the John Villante MMA math here. Anderson got knocked out by him. Lawlor knocked Villante out, but boy, was Tom Lawlor not looking good in that fight with Villante. And Villante is just one of those guys. He gets tagged and he goes out. He's just not durable enough or defensively sound enough or consistent enough in his approach. And Corey Anderson, having had 2 fights since that Villante KO, a fight in which he was doing surprisingly well despite getting the Tom Lawlor treatment in the first round, the leg kicks. Since then, he has just looked better by leaps and bounds. He's very young. I think he's 24. He is consistently improving as a boxer. He's got great teammates to work with and great coaches, Edson Barboza and Mark Henry. I imagine he works some with Frankie Edgar, and his ground game looks a lot like Frankie's. He's really dangerous from half guard. He mixes his takedowns with his strikes very much in the same way that Frankie always has. He's quick, seems to have really good stamina. He keeps a crazy pace. And in the sequences in which he was actually boxing with Fabio Maldonado in his last fight, he looked pretty comfortable in that range, a lot more than he did in the Villante fight. So I think Anderson is the prospect in this division. I think he has a ton of potential. And I think this is a great fight for him as sort of a way to get over the John Villante loss by beating the guy who just beat Villante, but not taking too big a step up. Because that's the danger in this division, is that you beat a couple nobodies and suddenly you're fighting like serious veterans from the Pride era who are, yes, they're past it, but they're still dangerous. Too much for a young, inexperienced fighter. So Tom Lawlor, he only wins when he like gets a stunning knockout or wrestles with people or jumps on the guillotine. I just don't see those kind of things happening with Anderson, who's just physically more imposing, faster, better stamina, more well-rounded. I think it's Corey Anderson all the way.
Yeah, the big thing is that I don't see Tom Lawlor out wrestling Corey Anderson.
No.
Because Anderson's a really solid wrestler and a very solid, good defensive grappler. Like,
Lawler's not that great of a takedown artist.
No. Anderson knows how to shut people down on top when in top position and just absolutely control them. And he's a good functional kickboxer. I think the biggest problem he had in that Villante fight was that he looked like he spent a ton of time working on his boxing and 0 time working on his kicking.
Yeah.
And Villante just kicked apart his legs to the point that Anderson couldn't really cope and wasn't focused anymore and then got knocked out.
Yeah.
Whereas Villante, I mean, his problem's always been cardio. It's always that he sets his good fast pace and then he starts to relax and he gets, or I don't even know if it's cardio, but it's cardio and relaxation. He gets relaxed. He starts to maybe get a little tired.
Something loses focus. Who knows? But you even almost have to respect Corey Anderson for not losing that fight due to leg kick TKO, because he was clearly completely unprepared to deal with the kicks. And John Villante is a hell of a hard kicker.
No, John Villante is a good, functional, well-rounded kickboxer when he remembers how to be.
Yeah.
Like, as long as his head's in the game, he's right there. It's just that his head's never in the game for a whole fight.
Yeah.
And Lawlor, I mean, there's a puncher's chance because it's light heavyweight and he can do that. But I really think that Anderson, he's not a dude that's going to get dropped by many single shots. Even that Villante knockout was kind of a slow accumulation of damage. And I don't see Lawlor doing that. So,
and again, I think Villante is a more impactful striker than Tom Lawlor.
Yeah. This should be a solid win for Anderson, and I expect him to kind of control it and just rough Lawlor up for 3 rounds.
Yep.
And that brings us to the co-main event. Holly Holm.
Not quite.
Oh wait. Oh yeah. Odds.
We also have a light heavyweight fight.
Oh yeah. Why am I missing that?
Latifi.
Oh yeah. Shit. Why? I guess I saw Villante. We were talking about Villante.
Yeah.
And my
got
brain
bored
just
of him already.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry. First of all, Tom Lawlor, Corey Anderson odds. Anderson's a favorite, -274 to -315. That seems solid to me. Tom Lawlor, the underdog, +252 to +210. That's fair.
Sure.
I mean, let's see. People have been asking for like the odds on the best path to victory for the underdog, and I got to think it's Lawlor by KO, and that's plus 600.
I
So
don't even think that is a big enough thing to risk throwing it out.
no,
I don't see it happening.
I don't think so either.
I don't think Anderson's actually a bad bet at minus 290. Like, I think he's a really sure thing in this fight.
Yeah, it does feel that way. I don't think there's any good reason to bet on Lawlor at all.
No.
And then, so that brings us to John Villante, Ilir Latifi, the aforementioned, and a fight that is it is weird in a way that only light heavyweight can put on fights this weird.
Really weird. It's way more compelling than it seems like it should be when you first see the matchup.
Yeah, because Villante, like, we were just talking about this, and Villante is a good, consistent, solid striker. Like, his striking game is well-rounded, it is nuanced, it is consistent. He strings together kick and punch combinations. He does so well. He does so round after round. At just some point, though, if he's winning really well, he just kind of checks out, I think. And if he's not winning, he kind of gasses out. And either way, at some point in the fight, his focus just goes away, and then he gets hit really hard. Because you look at his record, other than a fluky as hell Chad Griggs knockout back in 2011, that loss, all of his stoppages or all of his losses are either decisions, or I think his only other knockout loss is that
he should have had a knockout loss to Maldonado.
Yeah, is that Lawlor loss, and the Maldonado one, like, it's always him just slowly losing over time. Like, he doesn't actually have a terrible chin. He just kind of loses focus as the fight goes on. And so, at the same time, Ilir Latifi has none of the striking tools, none of the advanced toolkit, no leg, no punch kick combinations. If you ever see Ilir Latifi throw more than 2 strikes at once, it's probably because his opponent's already knocked out. And yet he also has, Thor's hammer in his hand. And if Villante gets sloppy over time, man, that is such a liability. Like, it is not hard at all to see Villante walking into the same punch against Latifi that he walked into against Lawlor.
Oh, yeah. And I think Latifi throws punches like that more consistently than Lawlor.
Yeah, much more consistently, with much better, cleaner technique, and with a lot more, he's got a lot more changeable a game around it. He's a better power wrestler. And he can change up that, like, he can hide a level change with a punch, or a punch with a fake level change, to get guys not looking for that strike. But do I really pick? I mean, do I pick a guy who got picked apart by Jan Blachowicz to beat John Villante?
It's a weird fight, right?
It is a super weird fight. I got to pick Latifi. Like, and this is a heart pick because I love Latifi and I think he's so much fun. And John Villante's fine, and he's a better fighter than he gets credit for. But I really couldn't give 2 shits about him in terms of watching him fight. And
he's fun in videos with Chris Weidman.
Yeah, he's fun in videos with Chris Weidman. I'm just not excited about John Villante, like, in the future. Yeah. But at least Latifi has this, like, air of the unknown about him. Like, this thought that
Latifi is just like this stoic Easter Island head figure.
You've seen the picture of him riding the horse, right?
Yeah.
Like the Conan the Barbarian, Ilir Latifi on horseback, where, like, it's just like somebody put a ball of muscle on a horse. It's as close as we'll ever get to centaurs, is Ilir Latifi on horseback.
Yeah, yeah. It's the most upper body with the least human lower body that's ever been on a horseback.
Exactly. And so I have this sense of like, in the right fight, could Ilir Latifi knock out Daniel Cormier? Maybe. Probably. No, I know. Don't tell me I'm dumb. I know I'm dumb. This is mysticism. Like, I'm in that.
Mysticism.
I'm in that Emmanuel Newton, headspace right now, where I'm seeing the universe and all of
So, what do the tea leaves tell you about Ilir Latifi's chances in this fight?
I'm picking him to win. I got to pick him to get a knockout because I just think at some point Villante's style just falls apart enough to get clubbered.
Yeah. Yeah, man, this fight. Like here's the thing. Latifi is so reliant. I didn't even realize until I started studying for this how reliant he is on catching people coming in. He is so reluctant to lead with strikes. And if you look at his last 3 losses, Emmanuel Newton, Gegard Mousasi, and Jan Blachowicz, all of those were guys who just basically kept him on the end of a jab, kept him on the end of their kicks, and picked him apart. And Newton Mousasi just tired him out and battered his face a little bit. Blachowicz got lucky and found the liver and knocked him out. But it's all just guys who don't overcommit, who don't take hard steps right into the pocket, into Latifi's range of his little T-Rex arms, who have some sense of defensive awareness. I think John Villante could be that guy for a bit. Like if John Villante works from range, he keeps his distance, he works his kicking game, he could totally do some damage to Ilir Latifi. And like I said, he's a powerful kicker. He's, he could definitely get that liver shot that Jan Blachowicz found. He's a good body kicker, kicks really hard to the legs. He's really good at that. And I do think that Villante has actually been improving little by little in his most recent fights. He looked good in the Tom Lawlor fight. He looked solid in the Corey Anderson fight, much better than he did in the O'Connell and Maldonado fights. And he looked fine against Perosh in a fight that we thought might actually be sneakily dangerous for him. It bears remembering he's only been fighting since February 2009. And he's 30, but that's not that old for a light heavyweight. So he could be coming into his own now. So this could be like a breakout fight for him. Thing is I just like, even in the Tom Lawlor fight, he was doing fine. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to run in with a 3-punch combination. And he just ran right into this counter. And like we said, Latifi throws those counters with much more speed and much more power and accuracy than Tom Lawlor does, because it's his whole game is like that counter right hand. So, yeah, I think Villante looks surprisingly well until he runs right into Latifi's right hand and gets knocked out. Second round knockout for it's in the Flight of the Birds. Ilir Latifi by Omen predicted second round KO.
On that note, Latifi is the favorite, minus 194 to minus 200. John Villante is the underdog, plus 174 to plus 150. And I am going to beg you all out there, people, do not bet on this fight.
No,
do not.
Don't bet on John Villante.
Or if you do bet on it, don't do it because we said to. Like, don't tie anything to our fight picks, because this feels like such a fucking coin flip. It is such a weird ass fight. And I will be Ilir Latifi, he is the dude who lost to Jan Blachowicz. And like, I don't know that he's much different than that dude right now.
I don't think he is.
But Villante is the dude who just lost to Tom Lawlor. And man,
Latifi lost to Fabio Maldonado and Tom Lawlor, both at light heavyweight. That happened.
Yeah. And just don't. Yeah. It's not worth it. That brings us to Holly Holm, Miesha Tate. Take this one away.
This fight's awesome. I think I have so much respect for Miesha Tate for Holly Holm for taking this fight, because I talked to Jordan Breen from Sherdog about this, and he was like, oh, like the UFC should totally match Miesha up with Holly. And I was like, man, if I'm them and I'm sitting here from a promotional perspective, I am saving her for Ronda's return, because That is a fight that people want to see. And if I'm Holly Holm, I know people were thinking of that like it was a bad deal for Holly Holm because they were talking about shelving her until Ronda came back and the champion shouldn't have to wait for the challengers. But that is a massive payday for Holly Holm against an opponent that she soundly beat, who vocally said she was making no changes, no discernible changes between the fights, who was like, of course I'm staying with my current training camp. And yes, I'm going to do everything the same. And, you know, like, and was like having suicidal thoughts, like someone who just doesn't seem very stable in their fighting career right now. And that would be the biggest payday of Holly Holm's life. You know, it would probably be bigger than 10 of her boxing fights combined, if not more. So I thought if I were Holly Holm, that's probably what I would have done. I would have been the businessman. Holly Holm didn't feel like waiting around. She's fighting Miesha Tate, who has basically lost to no one but Ronda Rousey in a long time. You could argue that she didn't deserve to lose to Kat Zingano because it was a close fight. And had she survived that KO and gotten the takedown she was going for when it was stopped, she could have very well survived that third round and won a decision. She is such a good fighter. Miesha's problem, and it will be a problem in this fight, is that she is always over aggressive to start with. She always comes out and gets into a little bit of a brawl, and she'll spend about a minute or two trying to brawl with her opponent, mixing it up in these exchanges. She's way too hittable. She stands up really tall right on the end of range. She's a little sloppy with her punching technique sometimes. So she's just too aggressive for her own good to start. But it's almost like she's kind of like Carlos Condit, in that once she puts herself through that early ringer, she then adapts from one round to the next, from one exchange to the next. Her early approach really belies just how intelligent and adaptable she is as a fighter. And you can see that she's had a lot of bad first rounds in her career. Two of them very recently against Jessica Ai and Sarah McMahon, both really tough starts to those fights. Both of them she adapted really well and came back and won 2 decisions. Same thing in the Julie Kedzie fight way back. I think it was similar in her 4th round submission over Marloes Coenen. She's good at doing that. She's tough. She has a multifaceted game, and she keeps coming. And Holly Holm, Holly Holm's gonna look like a big puncher for about a minute in this fight, just like she did in the Ronda Rousey fight. Because in Rousey, she had the most willing and the striker with the biggest gap between willingness and ability that she had ever faced in MMA. Because Ronda's perception of her own boxing ability was so much greater than her actual boxing ability, that she was just running into Holm's punches over and over and over again. And Holly Holm is not a hard puncher, but Ronda Rousey was just exacerbating that impact over and over, just colliding with it, and made Holly Holm look like this piston-like ramrod striker. It made her look like Conor frickin' McGregor, and she's not. And so I think Miesha gets tagged a bit early in this fight. I think she adjusts, changes her style, and adapts. And then we get into kind of a weird wrestle boxing approach from Tate, where she'll try and mix takedown attempts with punches, where Holm is going to try to counter her coming in and work her kicking game, keep the side kick out there in her stomach. I think Holm does a fairly good job of stopping most of Miesha's takedowns, but I don't think Tate actually fares that badly in a kickboxing bout. Just like she had those big moments of success against Ai and against McMahon. So to me, it feels like a Holly Holm decision, and I think a relatively close one. I think it's maybe like 3 rounds for Holly Holm, maybe 4 rounds. I think every round is fairly close. Miesha Tate is just, you cannot discredit her toughness and her durability and her will and her adaptability. And all of those things, I think, keep her in this fight a lot longer than it seems a lot of people are expecting her to.
Yeah, I gotta say, right after Holly Holm beat Ronda Rousey, my first thought was, I wonder what the hell people are gonna think when she loses to Miesha Tate.
Yeah, me too. I thought the same thing, and I don't think she'll lose, having thought about it more. But
but the thing is, have I thought about it more, or have I slowly talked myself out of it?
Yeah.
Like, because that's a danger. Is it like champion gets a belt around their waist, they spend a little time as champ, they get hyped for a while, and you start to be like, why would somebody beat them? Like, they're the champ, I mean,
and a lot like Velasquez Verdum, the fight wasn't 100% one-sided.
No.
it's become a lot more one-sided in retrospect, in hindsight. But like Ronda landed some heavy shots. She got her in the clinch. She got her to the ground. She had a few moments, and she just couldn't keep it up. And she was not.
You made a good
mentally
point
prepared.
in there that I want to pick up too. That like Ronda Rousey was the biggest gap between confidence and experience.
Yeah.
Of anyone that that Holly Holm had ever faced. But people have taken that to this idea that Ronda Rousey is like one of the worst strikers in the UFC.
Yeah, which is not true. I mean, obviously, look, she was knocking out Alexis Davis and Bethe Correia with ease.
And Sarah McMahon. Like,
yeah.
I honestly, like, as far as, I still think well, now they've got Shevchenko, so she's obviously third. Or she's obviously got to be in third, but like I honestly still think that Ronda is like top 5 for that division as a striker, and not because she's a technical marvel. She sure as shit isn't.
No, she's tough and she hits hard. I mean, you put her up there with people like you've got. What do you have? Like Holm, Shevchenko,
Not I.
I think I on a good day is one of the better strikers in the division.
Holm, Shevchenko. I would, and then Zingano and Nunes are the two arguable ones to me.
Okay, Nunes, sure, yeah.
In that they both have great ability for power striking, and they have none of the consistency that makes them dependable strikers that you can bet on time after time after time. And like Ronda Rousey's it doesn't take a technical marvel to be a great striker in that division.
No.
But Ronda Rousey just felt like she was God on earth, and she was not. So yeah, it really is one of those cases where the case against her has become just totally outsized with reality. Like looking at the recent UFC release, the recent or the UFC EA game released the recent striking ratings that they gave fighters, and they rated Ronda Rousey lower than Bethe Correia.
Oh,
yeah.
How is that possible?
I don't know.
And on the flip side, Holly Holm gets all this rub, but do you remember when Holly Holm went to a split decision with Raquel Pennington? Because that happened like a year ago.
Yeah, and her coaches are like, "Oh, she was sandbagging." It's like, yeah, sure she was. I'm sure that's what a fighter in the cage is doing.
She just didn't have someone running into her fist over and over.
Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of pick the upset here. I kind of feel like, you know what? Tate's gonna win it. I was especially impressed with what she was able to do again in that Jessica Eye fight, where she was able to adjust and figure out exactly what wasn't working and come back with a much more powerful, much better, much more finely tuned game plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that, like there's a very good chance that Holly Holm just stuffs her and is able to keep up that takedown game or keep up that outside pot shotting game and win the fight. But like even her fight with Marion Renault just sucked. Like it was just not a good performance at all. And I do not buy the sandbagging thing at all. And I think that it ended up Ronda Rousey being the exact wrong opponent for Holly Holm, or like the perfect opponent for Holly Holm. I mean, to make her look great.
Imagine the Ronda Rousey that fought Miesha Tate for the second time fought Holm that night, like with a little less confidence in her striking, with a little more awareness of how she needed to fight Holly Holm and not just running after her over and over. She very well could have beaten her. It was just a really favorable. It ended up being a much more favorable matchup for Holly than we realized. And and even though I'm not picking Holm or I'm not picking Tate here, I think. And we'll see this when you read out the odds on both these women. I think she's probably one of, if not the best value on the card.
Yeah, like I think there's a very good chance that Tate could win this fight. Like I think that she's just kind of gotten forgotten and passed over as for how good she is.
Yeah,
because she is not Ronda Rousey.
She looked like I said this on Heavy Hands, I think, this week, but she looked like Pat Cote 2.0 in that Jessica I fight, which is a really solid type of fighter to be given the state of the women's bantamweight division. Like just like a well-rounded fighter who knows how to grind, who knows how to mix these kind of okay takedown attempts with strikes. Like it was just that everything came together in her game. Everything was really fluid. Everything was built off of the technique that came before it. She looked really solid. And when you're as tough as her, just like Cote, when you're as tough as her and you have that much time to continue developing and improving, you're and as innately good, you are bound to turn into a long-term contender.
Yep. So the odds on this fight now, Miesha Tate is the underdog, plus 295 to plus 235. Holly Holm, the favorite, minus 300 to minus 380. And yeah, that might be worth a chance bet. It's not outsized. It's not huge considering how much more hype I would have figured Holm would have. But it's not. But Tate might not be a bad underdog bet there.
I think it's worse than Miesha Tate deserves.
Yeah.
The implied probability there, I think I did a calculator last night, and it was like a basically 25% chance that Miesha Tate wins. I think her odds are better than that.
I will say this too, though. One interesting point I would make is that win or lose this fight, Holly Holm does not lose out on a massive Ronda Rousey rematch.
Oh, no.
So, like, I don't think that there's a bad downside to her taking this fight.
That's true. That's a good point.
That rematch is still, like, a majorly hot... Like, there's still no star in women's MMA or out in the UFC that is anything like Ronda Rousey. McGregor is the biggest star in the hardcore bubble, the guy who can sell as many pay-per-views as Rousey. But Rousey is the only one who has the reach that she does outside of the sport.
Rousey is the one who, like, a random friend of your mom's will ask her about the fight result. Like, he'll be like, "Oh, your son writes about MMA. Did he see the Ronda Rousey fight?" Like,
yep.
She's not going to be asking about Conor McGregor. Mrs. Davis is not going to be asking about how McGregor KO'd Aldo in 13 seconds. She doesn't know.
No. That's the difference. So that fight will always be on the table for Holly Holm until it happens because Rousey's just too big a celebrity and people will want to see it again. That brings us to the main event, Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz. And man, like, I'm not picking against Conor McGregor. I love you, Nate. I'm sorry. But there's just no way. Like, I don't care that it's at welterweight. I don't care that he says all of the most random shit on the planet that is just, like, feels totally outsized and that his fans are as obnoxious as any in the business. He's walking the walk. He's doing the thing. Yeah. And I am so excited to see a great fighter in the UFC that's just like, shit, I'll go up a division. Come on. Let's do that right now.
Absolutely. And who has the power where, like, nobody at Zuffa can tell him not to. Yeah. It's like, fuck you. I'm going to fight at lightweight if I want. I'll win both belts. You can't stop me. Nobody sells as many pay-per-views as me.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so excited for it. I love what he's doing. And, I have to see the limits of his power striking style before I'm willing to sit down and say he cannot outpunch this guy, And Nate Diaz, he's got, the thing is that early fights are almost always bad on Nate Diaz. Like, early in the fight, because he tends to, like, he wins by taking all your punishment and then pouring it on as you start to flag.
Yeah, unless you're Donald Cerrone.
Yeah. Then he just finds a way to piece you apart. Like, if he doesn't have a huge obvious advantage in striking, then he will get hit a bunch early on. And if he gets hit a bunch early on by Conor McGregor, I don't trust him to be able to pour it on late. Like, I don't think that happens. And much more to the point, Nate Diaz's win over Michael Johnson was good, but it looked a lot better than it was. Like, I felt like that was a fight where by the end of it, Diaz was still getting hit a couple of times. It was like he was getting hit twice for every 3 times he hit Johnson. And he was walking through it all, and he had his arms up, and he was, doing the 209 thing to the max. But I know that sounds terribly white of me. But
not just white, but old, Zane. Don't sell yourself short.
Old and white. But like the fact that Johnson wouldn't go away and was willing and was standing in there meant that he still hit Nate Diaz a lot. He still made him work a lot. And it was more of like the bravado kind of overrode the performance for me. Like, Diaz looked like he was doing better than he was. And he was doing fine, but it wasn't like this amazing, overwhelming advantage. It was like, okay, yeah, you're winning most of the exchanges, but you're still getting hit in almost every exchange. You're just not getting hit quite cleanly enough to be hurt. And that kind of thing, like, McGregor is so... Like, I think the thing I love about this fight is it's 2 people that are absolutely indomitable, that will absolutely refuse to back off of their style. And there's just no way either of them says, okay, I'll take my foot off the gas first because this is starting to suck. And if it's somebody, it's probably not Conor McGregor, because I don't think he understands how that idea works.
No, if that Chad Mendes fight is any indication, he does not respond to disincentivization the way other fighters do.
Yeah. And I don't think that Diaz puts him on his back, frankly. And McGregor is an able offensive wrestler, not a good defensive wrestler, mostly just because he has no picture in his mind of the idea that he could get taken down when he's throwing hands. He's just kind of like, okay, I'm striking now, whatever. But I don't see Nate Diaz. Like, Nate Diaz doesn't have like this amazing shot that he's just going to like dive in and take you down. He kind of has to, like, you kind of have to push him to take, he relies on you trying to take him down because he's hurting you. And I don't see that happening. So I don't know. I don't know how far this goes, but I got to pick Conor McGregor to win it. And I probably pick him to get the knockout.
Conor McGregor has been talking about how he's going to come after Nate Diaz fast, really early into the fight. I don't know if I buy it, because I think that the one way to give Nate Diaz a real chance early, like to enhance the limited pop in his hands, is to just run face first into one of them. He's done that a few times in his career where somebody has bolted in and he has just laced them with a straight left down the middle. It happened to Gray Maynard. It happened to Takanori Gomi. When people run into that punch, it hurts. It really does.
It's the classic Nick and Nate Diaz thing, is to bait you into trying. Is when you come after them, they hurt you one time really hard, and that changes the whole rest of the fight.
Sure, yeah, and I do think, like, I've said this a lot this week and last week, but I think Nate suffers a little bit for comparisons to his brother. There's obviously a lot they have in common. They are both just A+ shitheads when it comes to fight taunting, and it's an amazing joy to watch. I just giggle like through 50% of that Michael Johnson fight. It's just so much fun to watch these guys getting their way and to watch them getting in their opponents' heads. And but Nate's a different kind of fighter than Nick. He's not. Everyone talks about, oh, he's got this crazy volume and he swarms, and he doesn't use volume in the same way Nick does. He still isn't this dynamite puncher, but he is a long range, defensively minded outfighter. That's his thing. If he had more power, he could be really dangerous from that distance. But even as it is, he got hit a lot in the Johnson fight, but he didn't get hit cleanly that much.
Yeah.
And he made Johnson pay with much cleaner strikes almost every time Johnson hit him. And man, it's not a good idea to let Conor McGregor hit you, but I think we're probably in for at least a round or two of some really interesting striking exchanges where Nick is going to stay behind his jab early, and McGregor's going to have to fight at range with him. And McGregor is obviously faster of foot, probably faster of hands, or at least he has trickier timing when he throws his hands. But, you know, I think this is the first guy he's ever faced with height and reach advantage over him. Maybe Joe Duffy was the only other guy, and he lost that fight. It was way early in his career, and he's not the same guy, but is the first guy in the UFC he's faced who has anything close to this amount of reach. And so I'm really interested to see how he deals with that. You got to pick Conor McGregor. You just can't, like, the guy, as you said, he is indomitable. He does not back down. Even in a fight with a guy who I think is the only one in the UFC who legitimately does not have Conor McGregor in his head. Even in that kind of matchup, I think McGregor is still the more mentally durable fighter. And I do imagine he carries something resembling his featherweight power up to 170, especially because he's not fighting a true welterweight here. He's fighting a guy who's been a career lightweight. So I think it's Conor McGregor. I think he does hit hard enough to stop Nate. I think it's probably the second or third round, though. And it may even be by virtue of his kicking game and not his boxing. He may sneak a left high kick up there or a wheel kick or something like that and put Nate down that way. But I love this fight. Like, this is a fight where it doesn't replace the stylistic matchup of Dos Anjos versus McGregor. It's definitely more favorable for McGregor than Dos Anjos would have been with his wrestling heavy style and his pressure and his durability. But Nate brings so much personality to the fight, and in a way that against a guy like McGregor, that can be just as much an advantage to have like a personality as big as his, where like you can tell both these guys like each other. You can tell, like, I don't think Conor McGregor can find it in himself to hate Nate Diaz. I just don't think he can do it. He probably came up watching Nate and definitely Nick. And if you look at his early fights, like, he was definitely emulating their style. He admired them. So it's like, for him, it's almost like fighting an idol, or at least fighting the little brother of someone who was probably an idol of his early in his career. So I think it's probably just a joy for him. And then Nate was like, Nate almost had like the Holly Holm attitude before she fought Ronda, where he was like, yeah, Conor could murk me, or, I could murk him. Like, he just doesn't, he's not worried. He's just like, it's fine. It's a fight. I got 2 weeks notice. Wish I had more, but I'm going to go in there and fight him. So it's just great. Like, the personality matchup is so fun, and I can't wait for this. And I hope it's not another like really fast first round KO from McGregor, because I would love to see an actual scrap between these two. And I would love to see Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor. I don't think, like, 100%, I don't think it's going to happen, but the fantasy in my head of that occurring is just, I'm so tickled by the thought, especially the thought of John Anik getting a 209 tattoo.
All right. On that note, the odds, Conor McGregor is at -380 to -490, and he's been rising all week. And Nate Diaz +405 all the way down to +290. So there's quite a bit of swing in there, but Conor McGregor is a solid favorite all across the board. Nate Diaz inside the distance, because I think if he wins, I could see him stopping McGregor, just because McGregor is so single-minded and is going to run himself into everything if he gets it in his head that that's how he wants to fight.
Yeah,
like,
he could very well think, I need to pressure Diaz, I need to get after him early, and that could be troublesome.
Yeah, and I think once McGregor has an idea like that, he just is so focused and absolute about things. So Nate Diaz inside the distance is +463, which, to be honest, is not much better than the odds you just get betting on Nate Diaz.
No, better just to bet on him. And also, you've got McGregor by KO. It was better yesterday. I think it was -220 or something like that. But even at -275, it definitely sweetens the odds. McGregor has only not won by KO once in the UFC. I think you give him 5 rounds to work when he hasn't weight drained himself, those chances probably go up.
Diaz by KO is +1270. So,
goodness me. Yeah. Do you want to do a couple of betting picks? Because I think there are some lines on this card.
Sure, go after it.
I think Jim Miller at -140 is not bad. I think Teruto Ishihara as an underdog is a very solid bet. I don't think you have to worry about banking on him by KO. Nordine Taleb's odds have actually gotten better since yesterday. He was plus 180. Now he's plus 190. He's not a safe pick, but I do think he stands a good chance in that fight. It's Erick Silva, for God's sake. Nordine Taleb is good at winning decisions. Erick Silva never, ever does. So I think that's not a bad bet. And then Valentina Shevchenko as an underdog. And Miesha Tate as a chance bet as an underdog. And Conor McGregor by KO. If you're going to bet on Holm, which I do think Holm is the better bet, then Holm by decision is plus 154. So if you think Miesha Tate is tough enough not to get finished, which I think she is, then that might be a way to, because that's considerably better than minus 325.
You can even bet fight goes to a decision is just plus 115.
Oh,
so
that's not a bad idea because Holm is tough too.
Yeah, that might be a good way to go all around. All right, on that note, it's time to close the show. You can find me on Twitter at TheseAintTime. You can find Conor on Twitter at BoxingBush. You can find us both writing on Bloody Elbow. Give us a like. That's the thumbs up thing down there on YouTube. And when you're on YouTube, go over and subscribe to MMANation.com. That's DOTCOM. That's our YouTube channel. It's where you get all our good analysis shows, interviews, all that stuff. And watch out. We'll have the 6th round coming at you. And then I got another Vivisection coming up this week for Bellator. And we'll have Knuckle Up next week. And then we'll just have our regular shows because there's no UFC card next week. We got a week off. So enjoy it while it happens. And we'll be right back in the thick of it.
Hopefully we will need that week to recover from the sheer awesomeness of this event.
That is the hope, indeed. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.